This podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Foundation.
Hello, everyone. We are once again broadcasting from downtown Atlanta at the Johnson STEM Activity Center, otherwise known as JSAC, where students learn to design and build robots, write code, build relationships, and of course, have fun. My name is Sophia Huynh, your host for today, and I'm so excited to talk with today's guest, who has been an essential part of JSAC. An important member of JSAC's Advisory Council, our guest has gone through some immense trials and life-changing tribulations that have inspired him to do what he loves in technology. Born in Mexico, he came to the United States as young as 6 years old, being under the DACA program since 2012. With his status, he underwent a multitude of different jobs: a door-to-door salesman, an educator, working in restaurants as a food runner and busser, and while on his career journey, he was inspired to pursue the tech field through a program called Year Up, and now currently works at GitHub, a Microsoft company, as a software engineer. Everyone, please welcome Fernando Sanchez. Hello.
Hello, yeah. Hi, great introduction. Very nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you too. So to start off, I just really wanted to say your background story has been so interesting to me, and I really think you have a unique multicultural experience moving from one country to another as young as 6 years old, right? So I guess my first question would be, do you even remember what that experience was like, right? Because you're 6 years old. How do you think this experience really became one of the keystones of your experience and kind of your identity?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, right? I was 6 years old. A lot of the memories I had from like Mexico and around that age feel very much like someone who woke up from a dream, right? You think you remember certain things, but you don't exactly know if they're 100% real, if they happened, right? If you made it up. So a lot of those memories that I have feel like that. I was born in Mexico, raised in Atlanta, so I feel definitely more Atlantean, more Georgian, more American than I do Mexican, which is something I have been struggling with. But that's definitely the core thing. Like identity has been the thing that changed, that influenced me the most because I came from a different country.
Right, and you're talking about this identity struggle. Mm-hmm. I guess, do you remember anything that popped out to you as kind of a culture shock when you first arrived?
Well, I ironically, or not, just English.
Yeah.
Right. I one of the core memories that I remember my mom telling me when I came over to the United States, like I was complaining, like, hey, everything's in English, right? I want, why isn't it in Spanish, right? Turn it to Spanish. Like, no, you can't do that here, right? It's just a different country goes by different rules, go by different, norms. And in the most obvious things, in the United States, you speak English. In Mexico, you speak Spanish. So that's probably the thing that everybody takes for granted, right? I know English. I was born here, therefore everyone speaks English. That's not necessarily true once you leave your bubble, your country. So that's a culture shock that everybody will face at one point in time. They travel to a different place. But that's the one of the core things that I remember, like when we came over to the United States.
Yeah, and so in your bio, it stated that you've been in the DACA program since 2012. Mm-hmm. So for viewers who might not know, what does DACA really stand for? What does it mean to be a recipient of DACA? Yeah,
and it's something I have been told, like, hey, when you go talk and when you do things, maybe don't bring up the fact that you're quote unquote undocumented or part of this program, because you might be signaled out, you might be, thought differently, and I thought that for a long while as well. Mm-hmm. But now it's more like, well, I think there should be more. I want to tell what we go through, right. With what our story basically, right? So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's a program, I think, established by Obama in 2012. And it basically gives those who were brought as children into the country with a clean history. So you have to be basically perfect record, right? No blemishes on your record whatsoever. And it allows you to get a Social Security card, which allows you to get a driver's license, which allows you to go to do many things that we take advantage of, granted for. And so I was undocumented prior to 2012. And then through that program, it also allows you to work legally.
Right.
So before then, I didn't work just because I couldn't. But after the program now, it gives around rough estimate of around 800,000 people are currently on the DACA program in the United States. And it allows them to work, pay taxes, get a driver's license, and just be more, a productive person in the country. And which they have to renew every 2 years. And same thing, you have to have a perfect record. If you have any blemishes on your record, you have to prove that you've been in the country, that you have committed no crime. You have to get biometric scans every 2 years. They have to do a full background checks every 2 years. So these are people who are working and doing that process every 2 years.
Right. So you kind of already talked about it, but I'm sure there's been a lot of different types of struggles being with undocumented status, and I guess for a different part, also some stigma surrounding that or some fear as well. I guess, how did you experience that, and how did those experiences influence how you are now? Yeah,
so I don't quite remember when I first learned, like, hey, you are quote unquote undocumented, you can't do X, Y, and Z. I don't remember exactly when I learned that, but I do remember naively, mostly, a caveat. Before, I'm not sure if it's still true, but when I was in high school prior to DACA around 2012, I graduated high school 2012, but before the DACA program. It was like a few months after it was approved, and I graduated a few months before then. But one of the things is that to apply to state schools in Georgia specifically, you have to have some form of residency, either private permanent residency, citizen, or on a visa. Right. Granted, I was none of those. Therefore, one of the things that I was told, right, you couldn't apply to a state school, which meant like no UGA, no Kennesaw, no Georgia Tech, which was my dream school at the time. And so naively, like, I was going through elementary, middle, and high school thinking, well, if I do my best, if I'm the best student, if I'm the smartest student, right, they'll have no choice but to take me, to at least look at my application, right? I'm not saying they have to accept me. I'm saying they have to give me a chance to apply, right? And obviously that was not the case. So that's why I didn't go to university after. But because of that kind of shaped my whole persona, right? I'm very, very hard-headed, very single-tracked. Like, oh, I want to do this, I'm going to do it. Disregarding all the external factors that are telling me not to. And I think that's a common theme with a lot of people who go not necessarily just through like DACA program like I am, or undocumented, but just real struggles, right? You poverty, certain things, external factors that keep you from not being able physically or financially to do something. Those are the kind of people that come out more on top, right? Because they're disregarding everything, just trying their hardest, and they have the hardest willpower to kind of push all that through. Right. And so that's one of the biggest things that DACA and being undocumented kind of shaped me, and I'm pretty sure is similar stories to a lot of people.
Right, like the strengthening of your mentality and your will force is kind of a testament to who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also in your bio, you said that you currently work in technology. But so what was the first memory, I guess, you had of technology that made you fall in love? What was it about technology that was like, I know for sure that I'm going to pursue a career in this?
Yeah, like, might seem funny, but like, I remember being in Mexico. My dad, he was in the United States at the time. I think I was 5 or 4. But he sent me like a robot, like a really, really, you'd find like at a flea market, a little like blue little robot that would takes like AA batteries and just does boop beep boop beep and just makes noises and lights, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was the coolest thing. That was like my prized like toy back in Mexico. And I was always really intrigued, like, oh, it does this, it does that. Why does it do all that? I didn't get a chance to like tinker, but that was my first thought of, hey, this is cool. I want to know how it works, because tech and all STEM related things are just curiosity, right? Like, just I was curious on how things work. Therefore, I went into tech, and so that was my first real core memory that I remember, where I was genuinely curious on something, and that I wanted to kind of figure it out. So that's definitely the first experience of me wanting to get into tech, even if I didn't realize it at the time.
Right. So through your journey, you credited the program called Year Up, which kind of was the spark that led you to the tech industry. So what did you actually do in Year Up, and what ways do you think it really helped you with your career now?
Yeah. So Year Up is not dissimilar to like a boot camp, but they don't focus necessarily on tech and programming and the like. Mm-hmm. So they're a workforce development program. They have multiple programs throughout the United States. They have them in most major cities.
Okay.
But the story of how I actually got into the program was pure circumstance. I always say, like, the reason I'm quote unquote successful and I'm in a good place, and despite everything we're talking about now, is because I got lucky. And I think nothing shows that more than me getting to Europe. So, like you mentioned before, I didn't go to after high school. Didn't go to college or university. I did many odd jobs, like you read out earlier. And once I did get the DACA program approved and gone through that, I was like, okay, maybe I should go back to school. So I went to Georgia Perimeter College, which got absorbed by Georgia State here in Atlanta. But I went there 2 years, got an associate's degree, and same thing, naively thinking like, okay, well, I have a degree now, right? Like most people think, like, I have a degree. It's not the full bachelor's, right? But it's something, right? I maybe I can do something. So I was like, maybe I work IT support or whatever. I got my associates in computer science, which I took like one computer science class, so I still had no idea what like programming or developing was. So I went and like asked around and like tried to get a job in IT, but obviously could not, because it's the circle of death, right? Where you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. So it was that. So I remember asking around on the internet too. I was like, there's a forum called Reddit, and there's like a CS help or subreddit. Basically, you can ask for help. And I'm like, hey, these are my situations. I have no idea what to do. I do want to work into tech because I have a CS degree. Not sure what that means yet, but therefore I want to do it. And one person posted like, hey, my friend, he actually did his program. I can't vouch for it, but it's called Year Up. Give it a look. And so I did, and like I went through it, and I went through the orientation and like the basically informational interview. And I'm like, okay, well, this is cool, but I'll give it a chance next month, or like next cycle. They do 2 a year, so like next quarter. And then on the train, I was in MARTA, and like going back home, and I remember just sitting and waiting. I'm like, you know what? Just an instant thought, like, okay, maybe I'll do it. Like at that time, I actually had a job offer from Quick Trip. I was going to be an associate night manager. And that's the reason why I didn't take it, because I'm just going to go work. And once I get enough money or experience or whatever, I'll go do something else. And then at that moment, I was like, you know what? No, I'll do it. Why not? It won't hurt me. So like leaped out the train, gave him a call back and told him like, sure, I'll do it. And so I know that's a long-winded preface to answer your question. Is like, what is Europe?
Right.
But so Europe was a workforce development program. It's a year-long thing. So it's a first 6 months, you're in a traditional, basically 9-to-5 school. The one that I went to was here in Midtown. It's not there anymore. They moved it somewhere else. But I was go to class every day. You do classes like customer service and business writing and things that you would consider, business oriented, Excel, Word, those things. But they also had like for 2 months, they had a computer class, programming class where they taught you basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so the last 6 months is basically how you did in the first half. They put you in an internship. So they have many partners. And thankfully, they put me in an internship at Here Technologies as a web developer intern. Because I was very interested around the first half, constantly learning about web development. And so, long story short, on that, I went there for 6 months for the internship. They liked me. They offered me a full-time job, and that's kind of how I snuck in the door of into tech. And I've been just working in tech as an engineer since then.
So for those who are unfamiliar, you currently work at GitHub. Yes. So what does GitHub do? It's a kind of an offshore of a Microsoft company, correct?
Yeah, so they were bought in like 2018, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so GitHub is just think of Google Drive, think of what are other ones? Like Drive. Google Drive, a place where you can store your files. It's basically that for code. Mm-hmm. So when you applications are made out of code is basically just, text in a file. And so GitHub is a place where you kind of store these, your work, your code, your writing in it. Similar as like Google Drive, you store your files, your files, your music, your videos, etc. So similar thing, just for code.
So what do you specifically do for your job as a software engineer at GitHub? Yeah, so
software engineers in general, or tech in general, is a lot of collaborative work. So the team that I work on is for marketing services, for marketing platforms, for GitHub. So a lot of things that bring in customers, and then we take those and kind of like funnel them and get more, try to get more leads and boring things like that, honestly. But the main core of it that I do is which is similar to everyone who, if you ever work in the tech industry, especially as a software engineer, you'll a lot of collaborating, a lot of discussing requirements, like, oh, what should we do? A lot of debugging, like, oh, this broke. No idea how to do it. I need help. A lot of reaching out, like, oh, I need help, come help me. So a lot of discussing. I know the what's the term, but the stigma for engineers or people in STEM is like, oh, they're very antisocial, they're very to themselves, they want to be left alone. But ironically enough, once you're in professional setting, that's completely the opposite. You need to be constantly, talking to people, discussing, collaborating. And that's most of the things that I do. Like, if you were narrow it down, there's a few hours of coding, and then there's a few hours of like just talking to people and discussing and like reading and trying to wrap your head around the problem.
Right. And I think that's a really cool thing that you really brought up, kind of the preconceived notion of, people in STEM, you're in your own single cubicle, you're typing away, you're sitting in one spot all day. But you kind of mentioned that you guys really focus on problem solving in general. So you're doing and focusing a lot on collaboration, working with each other, figuring out together how to problem solve. And speaking of collaboration, you are also a part of the JSAC Advisory Board. So how did you first find out about JSAC in particular, and what kind of led you to the position that you have now? Yeah, so again, it's all luck. You can be the hardest worker, you can do all the right things, but the sad, honest truth is, like, if you have to get lucky at some points in your lives, right? Like I mentioned with my Europe story, like I got lucky
just because somebody messaged me and told me to look at Europe, right? That was purely out of my control. I've done things to maybe put myself in that position, but ultimately it was luck for that person to be at the right time and do that. Similarly, I'd say got lucky with JSAC as well, because I remember it was like November 2019 before COVID, and one of my friends from community college called me and like, hey, his brother works at JSAC, and they're looking for they need help for like curriculum or to utilize their space. I can't remember the specifics, but would you be willing to help? I'm like, yeah, I don't say no to anything, right? So yeah, let's help out. And so I came. Originally I did curriculum. I taught a little bit basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, basic computer science, and then COVID hit, and then things blew up. It was harder to contribute, but I stayed trying to help with Johnson STEM. But like I was saying, all luck. Friend called me, told me about this great program, told me about this great nonprofit, and I said yes, came and helped.
Yeah, so I understand that you've actually spent countless hours now that you've been with JSAC, volunteering and kind of being a part of the JSAC community. Why do you think it's so important that people such as yourself volunteer in places such as JSAC? Yeah.
Countless hours, yeah, because I don't keep count. But yeah, because 2019, I've been doing it since 2019. So math, someone can do the math, but yeah, I think it's really important, just because I feel that, like I keep bringing up, I am lucky. I have gotten lucky. I was lucky that I had a functional family home. I had loving parents. I had a stable household. I was lucky that I didn't have to work during my time at Europe. I was lucky that I didn't have to work during my time at community college or during my time at high school, right? That's not true for everybody. And so I was lucky to have that time to focus on what I really wanted to pursue. And in this case, it was, computer science and programming. And so when I think about that, is like, I really want to be in a position where I can be the luck for someone else, right? So when I work here, we interact with kids, we run programs, we've just recently got, the VR room, we have the computer lab room, and we interact with everybody all the time. And so people don't really realize how important certain things are. And I'm not even saying big things, like, saying hi to a kid or, young adult, and saying one thing that might pique their interest, that will snowball into another, big thing. So just being in a position where I can trigger a snowball, I think that's the right thing I'm trying to say, is the most important part, and mostly because I acknowledge that my position is, yes, it's due for luck. I mean, I did the hard work, but most of it was luck. And so being in this position where I can help out and create, strong foundations for events, for open houses, for children to enjoy things, hopefully, right? Because I probably won't be able to see it firsthand, but hopefully that the experience that I help create or support allow for these young adults to discover something that they would have never discovered before.
Right, definitely. Kind of like you're talking about the small actions that we necessarily don't even think about every day can leave a really great impact on someone else's life.
Right.
So as a software engineer, why do you think learning code specifically and kind of the skills that you use in your everyday life are so important for today and maybe other people who are watching? Yeah, so I mean, this is if you get anything out of this podcast, is that everyone is an engineer. Everybody is in STEM. Everybody is as a researcher, as a scientist, is tech savvy. Because at the core of it is play. Everybody, when they're born, they love to play. They love to figure how things work. What is a ball? If I roll it, what happens? Right? Everybody is genuinely curious. And that's all
STEM in general is your curiosity leading to discover how things work, right? And everybody has that. Everybody has that innate curiosity. And so don't let something, preconceived notions or beliefs stop you from doing something that is interesting, right? If you really wanted to be an engineer, you can do it, because there's a million things to engineer. And even if you think, okay, well, that's too hard, you can start small, right? You can learn how a ball works, learn how, look how your favorite toy works, just learn how, go into nature and see, oh, the wind is blowing. Why is it blowing that way? That's art. That's engineering. That's STEM, right? So to answer your question, because I rambled for way too long, is that everybody is curious. Therefore, everybody should explore that curiosity, which is why everybody should learn to love STEM, code, programming, technology.
Yeah. And kind of going back, because of your undocumented status, you said you undertook a wide variety of different jobs, working in sales, education, even the restaurant industry as well. So now as a software engineer, how do you think those experiences of maybe some odd jobs kind of prepared you for the actual career that you have currently? Yeah.
So, I mean, like, one of the things that I thoroughly believe, like, should be part of like the high school curriculum is like everybody should go work a service industry job, right?
Definitely.
That's your fifth period, right? You should go work a server, 3 hours as a busser, as a food runner, as a server, because it helps you interact with people. And like I mentioned before, people think engineers, at a computer all day, coding away and doing their stuff. But like I mentioned before, it's a lot of discussing and talking, communicating. And so what I did before is I was door-to-door salesman, which was the worst job I've ever had. I would knock at strangers. I would walk into their homes. I would try to sell a product that they did not want or need. And so, I mean, that obviously helped me with when I need to talk to strangers, need to talk to people. It definitely helped with that. Same thing with with the restaurant work. Learning high pace situations, handling pressure, handling stress. Which all are things that you're going to need to be a successful anything, right? Once you're in the professional field, things will get stressful, things will get hard. And I think if you can figure that out and discover that as early as possible, right? Doing things straight out of high school, doing things within high school, you'll be more successful.
Yeah. And last but not least, what advice would you give to those who might be interested in learning more about software engineering?
Yeah, I mean, explore, ask questions. I think that's the biggest one. Ask questions, right? I remember when I was, like I said, I graduated associates in computer science, but I had no idea what it was. I could have asked questions like, oh, I don't know what this is. It's easier now to ask questions than it was ever, right? You can look for forums, Google. I mean, there's Chat GPT now that will give you great answers for the most part. And discover that. Like, don't think that you can't do something just because it feels hard. Ask and wonder why you feel that way. Like, you really want to make robots? Great. Like, ask what's the most simplest thing you can build, right? Always try to build the most simple thing. You love Twitter, you love, well, like X, I guess now, but Twitter is what I'm calling. You love Facebook, you love YouTube. Like, okay, I want to make something. We'll make something super simple, right? You don't realize how complicated super simple is. And so the core message is, if you want to learn something, the most effective way to learn is not to do a course, is not to do a class, is not to, read a book, which all of them are great, but the best way to do it is just to do a project, make something, right? Make a little robot, make a little site, make a little something. You'll quickly realize that feels more impactful, because once you're done, you could share people. Like, right. Hey, I made a little robot that just moves left and right. Mm-hmm. Or I made a site that just renders hello world, or it just shows a picture of a cat, right? And those who are in the industry, like if you show an engineer, like, hey, I made a picture of a cat, like a website that has a cat, that's it. Well, it might be super simple to them, but they'll realize like, hey, I understand how much that goes into. That's an accomplishment.
Right.
Right? Like, even if you don't feel like something is big, it is. And those who are well established will realize that it's big because it's your first step. So yeah, so take your first step, do something small that you might find it's silly, but that's like I've been harping. That's all engineering is. It's just grown men and women being silly, making things.
Definitely. That was great advice. And thank you so much, Fernando. It was a pleasure talking with you and having you on the JSAC STEMcast. So thank you all, our audience, for watching and listening. Without viewers and listeners like you, this podcast is simply not possible. But to learn more about JSAC or to listen to our previous episodes, visit www.johnsonstem.org. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have all a wonderful day. Bye.